All right, joining us now here on Texans Radio, it's Matt Taylor, voice of the Colts. Matt, great to see you as always. How's it going?
Likewise, Mark, great to see you. Life is good. Enjoying some time here in the summer before the chaos of training camp begins, but life is good. Enjoying some hot weather here.
Well, we're opening the season at Indianapolis, and I'm hoping the pool is cleared out by then because we've been watching the U.S. swimming trials. That has to be bizarre. I mean, they built a swimming pool on the surface of Lucas Oil Stadium. Very impressive.
And I'm sure you've seen the images, in the highlights of the races. Um, it looks, Mark, it's unbelievable. It looks like the pool was there this entire time. I mean, it looks like the
Mhm.
place was built for a natatorium, if you will. I mean, the job they did was absolutely seamless. And I know you and I have talked about these types of things before, but Indianapolis just does an unbelievable job at hosting big events and thinking outside the box. So, leave it to the movers and shakers here in Indy to turn an NFL stadium into a natatorium and a big size Olympic size pool. It's absolutely unbelievable. I saw I saw the pool. I haven't been yet to a an event, but I've seen the pool. I was able to get in the stadium and actually see it and witness it for myself. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, and you're right about Indianapolis because I know that when the schedule comes out, it's always tough for our guys to book the hotel rooms for the team because there's always a convention or something
Right.
in
Right.
Indianapolis. It's like the Vegas of the Midwest or something. I don't know why.
And I've actually talked to the president of the Indiana Sports Corp about that a couple of weeks ago before the swimming trial started. You've been to Indianapolis several times, but I mean, you've got the Indianapolis 500. You had the All Star game here. You got the Big Ten championship game. You have the Big Ten basketball tournament that's routinely here. Pacers, Colts. Now the Fever are rolling with Caitlin Clark in town. I mean, it's just a great place to be, anyways. But sports has always kind of defined the city.
Matt Taylor, voice of the Colts, joining us. Okay, biggest offseason story with the Indianapolis Colts. In your opinion, what is it?
Man, that's a good one. It's probably got to be just the return and the health of Anthony Richardson at quarterback. I mean, obviously they missed him for 13 games last year, and it all kind of came to a head there in that Week 18 game against the Houston Texans. Obviously, that was the win in your end game, and Texans won. The Colts are kind of have to deal with that this entire offseason. Um, but Anthony Richardson's return and getting to watch him here in the spring, Mark, he looked like the biggest takeaway for me as it relates to him is he just doesn't look like a quarterback that's coming off of off-season shoulder surgery. The arm strength was really good. The velocity I thought was even better compared to last year, believe it or not. And the buzzwords that you're hearing with him as it relates to the coaching staff here in the spring was accelerated vision, knowing where to go with the football, getting the ball out faster. He was going to the right places with the ball, but now it's just being delivered even more timely to the playmakers on offense so that they can go make plays. So all of the mental things that he was left to process just by watching last year kind of kicking in. And I think you're going to see big time growth from year one to year two with Anthony Richardson, plus him understanding better the nuances of the NFL, knowing basically how to play the football game in terms of intensity, right? Knowing when to push it, when to slide, when to get out of bounds, when to throw it away. I think the Colts are going to be much more intentional about design runs with him. If I had a gut about that, Mark, I would probably say it's going to be more like Lamar Jackson, right? Inside the red zone in the fourth quarter, games on the line, put the ball in you put the ball in the hands of your best playmaker. That's what I think you're going to see out of the Colts as it relates to Richardson, being smart with him, but also not taking away why you drafted a guy of his athleticism and skill set fourth overall a couple years ago.
They had him on a bit of a pitch count or adjusted schedule, right? In the offseason program.
Believe it or not, not really. I mean, towards the end of minicamp, he dealt with some soreness in that right shoulder, right, the surgically
Mhm.
repaired shoulder, and they were actually surprised that he hadn't had more soreness up until then. Um, obviously they're going to do right by him, and they're going to make sure that they don't push it when they don't need to, right? Kind of understanding where they are in terms of the calendar, right? At that point, it was late May, early June. But they did say that, if this was a Sunday, right? If, they had a mini camp on Wednesday and Thursday, if they had a game on Sunday, he would have been able to play. So that's good news. So obviously going into training camp, the next thing or the next question is going to be, what does he look like? Does he need days off? Can he be able to consistently throw 3-4 days in a row at camp? And what are things going to look like when you take that red non-contact quarterback jersey off once the Bolts start flying for real, as you said, week 1 against the Houston Texans?
All right. I think the Colts are undervalued by some, and Jonathan Taylor is a huge reason for that. I mean, this guy is one of the best running backs in the league, and I think it's not like people forget about him, but maybe he's underappreciated around the NFL, the kind of weaponry that the Colts have, starting with him. I mean, we could talk about Richardson and Pittman all day long, but Taylor is really the straw that stirs the drink, no?
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think maybe there's a national forgetfulness regarding Jonathan Taylor the last 2 years just because of how the seasons have gone for the Colts. I mean, 22 was a disaster. 23 was up and down, no Richardson for a majority of the season. Taylor was dealing with the off the field stuff, with the contract drama. Then he started the year on PUP. So there was a lot of like stopping and starting of Jonathan Taylor these last 2 years. And, when you look at Richardson and Taylor together, Mark, believe it or not, those two guys played 2 snaps together the entire season. That was it. 2 snaps the entire year last year on the game field.
Wow.
So I think this is a big time, fresh start for both guys and kind of a new beginning of an era in the backfield between Richardson and Taylor. And, you mentioned Pittman and Josh Downs, that receiver. I really think, Mark, in order for this offense to kind of take the next step and to really complement Anthony Richardson, they've got to be better outside, right? There was just times last year, and this, I think it's probably more of like the Gardner Minshew effect more than anything. There were just times last year where it felt like the Colts were playing on like a 15 to 20-yard field. They just didn't have a lot of pop outside the numbers and vertically to push the ball down the field. So I thought it was imperative for the Colts to address that here in the offseason. And I think they did really adequately. Josh Downs is coming back for year number 2. Michael Pittman gets a big time deal in free agency. But when you draft Adonai Mitchell in the 2nd round, Mark, I think that's a big time steal for the Colts, given his skill set, his value, and where he was picked up in the draft. I'm sure you can agree with that. I'm sure John Harris had really high marks on him during the draft process. He looks like he can kind of fix some of those ailments for the Colts in that regard. So that's a long-winded way of saying if the Colts can be more of a threat outside and down the field, that'll really open up the running game with Jonathan Taylor and Anthony Richardson. I mean, I think it's going to be huge in the design runs, but also the read zone, the zone reads, in the RPO game. That's really going to help the Colts be able to be more efficient on offense. And you've seen it too, Mark. I mean, these two guys, Richardson and Taylor, they can take a little bit of a crease and turn it into a home run, a 60, 70-yard gallop by both of those guys with their speed and their athleticism. So as long as the passing game complements the running game in this sense for the Colts, I think those two guys have the best chance to be the best quarterback running back duo in the NFL, given their athleticism.
Wow. Matt Taylor, voice of the Colts, joining us. All right, tell me about Joe Flacco a little bit here, because Minshew played the bulk of the season. You hope Flacco doesn't, but what about the addition of him after having the fine season he had in Cleveland? I know it didn't end well for him, but he brought them to the playoffs.
No, absolutely. I mean, it was all going well until he played the Houston Texans, right, in the playoffs. But he's a remarkable guy. I got a chance to just kind of, shoot the blank with him a couple of weeks ago before a minicamp practice. I mean, Joe's a cool dude. He's down to earth, and he's just going to shoot you straight, tell it like it is. And I think he's perfect for Anthony Richardson in the sense that, Joe has this ability. I don't know if this is going to make sense to you. You've seen enough of his games over the years, Mark. He just has this ability to not overcomplicate the game. And I think, obviously quarterbacks have a lot of stuff on their plate. And I'm not downplaying that with Joe Flacco in mind, but he just has this ability to just Take what the defense gives them. And I think both guys, Richardson and Flacco, believe in the chunk play, the deep ball. They both throw a very good deep ball, and they believe in being efficient in that part of the offense. But I think that Flacco's going to come in and help Richardson, simplify the game a little bit. It's okay to check it down or throw it away or take 5 yards to set yourself up for 3rd and 2 instead of going for the big play. So that's what I'm really excited to see. And there's this debate around here in terms of the depth at quarterback, because the Colts also too have Sam Ehlinger, who they drafted a couple years ago, guy that played in your state at the University of Texas. And they're still high on him. And there's this debate: is there going to be a quarterback competition between Flacco and Ehlinger? I just find it hard to believe that a Super Bowl champion, a guy that's thrown for over 44,000 career yards, is going to be, holding the clipboard and running down the practice squad. So, but Sam Ehlinger is a great player too. I mean, every time he comes in, good things happen typically. But I think Joe Flacco is a guy that if he has to play, the Colts still can push the ball down the field with that weaponry that I talked about, plus Flacco's ability to still be able to get it done like he showed last year, throwing for over 300 yards in 4 straight games at one point last season.
Matt, I like to ask questions like this. Give me 1 or 2 Colts that aren't getting a lot of attention that you expect maybe not huge things from, but exciting things from, and they're going to be valuable contributors in 2024, guys who aren't getting the ink.
Well, a guy that maybe Texans fans forget about because he literally played 0 snaps last year for the entire season is Galani Woods, the tight end. They picked him up in the draft in 2022, had a pretty good rookie season, kind of up and down, but he had some breakout moments. But last year he dealt with nagging hamstring injuries, multiple hamstring injuries for the entire season, and never saw the field. And the Colts are really high on him, and that they believe that he can maybe be part of that puzzle that helps push the ball down the field a little bit more. He's kind of the closest thing the Colts have to, a Travis Kelce or a George Kittle, and that's being generous. They've got a good skill set of tight ends in the room, but nothing close to those dynamic playmakers that I just mentioned. But Woods, I think, is a guy that can be a mismatch. He's a former quarterback, former basketball player in high school, good athleticism. He's got great, measurements about him, height and weight, really good footwork. He's a willing blocker. Maybe he can, supply some big plays in the middle of the field, up the seam. So don't sleep on him. And then on the other side of the ball, I mean, obviously everybody's talking about Latu, who was the 1st round pick for the Colts, the 15th overall selection. And also too the first defensive player off the board. So the Colts feel like they got their guy on the defensive side of the ball with that 15th selection, a big time steal there with all those quarterbacks that went at the top of the draft. But I just think in general you should be talking about this Colts pass rush. Last year they had 51 sacks as a defense, which was a franchise record. But Mark, they weren't always the most timely sacks, right? At times last year, the sack numbers look good, but in big moments, right? I go back to that Week 18 game against CJ Stroud. He was all too comfortable in big moments of that game in the 4th quarter, if you're a Colts fan. So they want to see more consistency out of the overall quarterback hurries, the pressures, and the sack numbers should be pretty good, but they just want to see more disruptions that lead to errant throws and takeaways by the defense. So I think that the secondary is going to benefit from that, and hopefully you're going to see a much improved pass rush because of Latu, and all the core pieces that are coming back.
I mean, the 51 sacks being a franchise record kind of blows me away, considering the players that you've had in Indy, like Robert Mathis, Dwight Freeney. You're dealing with that, and that was a franchise record on last year's team. I know it was a winning season, but that's pretty amazing.
Well, what had happened in years past, to your point, you've got Mathis and Freeney as the bookend defensive ends, and that was the hallmark for the Colts. I mean, the Colts would get up by 2 scores in the 4th quarter, and then that defense could just go, right? They could just pin their ears back, and that's when the strip sacks came. Those game-changing or game-sealing plays happened with those 2 Bass brothers. But I think you're going to see or at least what you saw last year, you saw 4 different guys for the Colts with at least 8 sacks, including DeForest Buckner, Samson Ebakom's coming back, Kwity Paye just got his option picked up, so they're high on him still. But I'm telling you, Mark, they really think that Liatu Latu is going to be that missing piece, right? And it goes back to what I said before. Like in big games and crunch time, it's all about just winning your one-on-one matchup and getting to the quarterback. And I think the Colts think that he's going to be their version, hopefully sooner than later, of the Bosa brothers or TJ Watt. They think he can be that good, and they need him to be that good pretty early on in his career based on how they've built this team.
Matt Taylor, voice of the Indianapolis Colts, joining us. Matt, let's talk about the people who are not in the room. That would be the Jacksonville Jaguars and Tennessee Titans. First with the Jags, what do you think here in 2024? They just signed Lawrence to the extension. They lost some guys, but they have a lot of good players, and this is a winning team 2 years in a row. I know they melted down last year, but what are your thoughts on the upcoming campaign?
I think the Jaguars are going to be really good. I think the AFC South in general, Mark, I think it's going to be a dogfight. I really do. I don't see any teams like the Jags last year falling off a cliff, right? When they lost 5 of the last 6 games to end the season. I don't see that happening. I mean, Trevor Lawrence just got solidified with the big deal. I know they're kind of switching the play calling. I don't know if it's going to be Press Taylor again this year or if Doug Peterson's going to take on those roles again. Mm-hmm. But I think the Jaguars are going to be really stinking good. And I'm actually much higher on the Titans than most people are. I think Will Levis is going to be really good too. And they've had a deceptively productive and complimentary offseason, especially on offense, around Will Levis going into the season. So I think the AFC South is going to be one of the more competitive divisions in the NFL. And we say it every year. It's cliche. It's hyperbole. Yes. But this year, I really do think it's accentuated that every single one of these games, Mark, is going to have so much magnitude. And if you look at the Colts and the Texans right away in week 1, and then you get them at the end of October. So the Colts and Texans rivalry is going to be done before the halfway part of the season. Like, selfishly, weird. I think that sucks. But that's the way it goes. You got to play all the games, and doesn't matter. They all count the same. But I would like to selfishly see some of these division games a little bit more spread out as it relates to the Colts schedule. But that's what they've had to deal with the last couple of years. And that just means the first half of the season, you got to bring it, because if you lose those games, man, they count as 2, they count as double, and your margin for error in the second half of the season, it's going to be razor thin. I can't wait for it.
Yeah, there's no question. Being done so early is a bummer. This is the earliest the series will have been completed ever. I went back and tracked it. 2010 was really early, but it wasn't this early, so it's just strange. But that's the way it is, like you said. Matt Taylor, voice of the Colts, joining us. All right, so what do you think of the Texans from your seat, Matt?
Same thing. I think the Texans are great. I mean, credit to that entire organization, the front office and the vision, and obviously, the new head coach there with Coach Ryans. I mean, he's got those guys humming, and I think their offseason was splashy. I thought a lot of their moves made a whole lot of sense. The trade for Diggs, I thought, was really, really savvy. I know he's kind of on an prove-it situation, if you will, long-term. But, it's scary for the rest of the division that C.J. Stroud has even more weaponry to throw the football to. And if you're a Colts follower, that's terrifying because, he basically got it done with one guy last year. That was Nico Collins in that Week 18 game. I know Dalton Schultz had a nice game too. But in terms of the outside weapon-wise, it was really one guy, and the Colts had a hard time slowing that down. And now Stroud's got even more, pieces of the puzzle to work with. So I think it's going to be a great rivalry. I do. I mean, I think both places, both stadiums, both fan bases are just top-notch. I can't wait for it. I think, Mark, and I think you would probably expect this, I think that first game of the season, week 1, it's going to feel like a playoff game because I think both fan bases are smart enough to know what they're looking at. They're looking at, the future of these franchises that I don't think are going anywhere anytime soon because of the head coaches, the core that's been built, and certainly the quarterbacks.
One more, Matt. What's the circle that one on the calendar game for you out of the division for the Colts, and maybe for you personally too, if it's not the same thing?
It's probably the second game, to be honest with you. I think it's at Lambeau. Just because you play the Packers once every 4 years, you go to Lambeau once every 8 years because of the NFC breakdown. But it's another great barometer game for the Colts. I mean, selfishly, I'm excited to go to the historic Lambeau Field. I've never called a game there before, so that part is I'm looking forward to kind of checking off. But I mean, I'm looking at the schedule right now, Mark. You've got Houston at Green Bay, Chicago, Pittsburgh for the Colts to start the season. So 3 out of your first 4 games are at home. That's good. But also 3 of your first 4 games to start the season are against teams that made the playoffs last year. And that wild card within that group are the Bears, and you don't know what they're going to be. They could be, way more improved with Caleb Williams at quarterback. So you don't really know how to gauge that game early on in the season. So I'm just excited to see how the Colts navigate the first part of the schedule. Selfishly excited to go to Lambeau Field, but I'm also hoping that, I know you would disagree with this, but hoping the Colts can get off the schneid for week 1. Hopefully they can beat the Texans. The Colts, Mark, they have not. Let me ask you this, a little bit of a trivia question. When was the last time you think the Colts won a week 1 game?
Oh, this goes back a long way, doesn't it? It's like 2014 or something ridiculous like that.
It's even more ridiculous. It's 2013. Just to give you perspective, they beat the then Oakland Raiders, right? The Raiders hadn't even moved yet. So that's kind of, everybody around here is sick of that storyline and trying to get off to a good start. And Anthony Richardson coming back and a lot of hype there. Hopefully, it's a little bit more manageable to start the month of September, and the Colts aren't in a hole, which has kind of been a theme for them the last, 4 or 5 years going back a little bit.
Going to be fun. Matt, thanks so much for joining us. Have some fun time off if you can, and looking forward to week 1.
It's going to be here. Thanks, Mark.